their ability to pay for their treatment. And so there are some people who, yes, they may not be in the hospital, but they are literally going broke on trying to just take their medicine every day. And we don't think about, when you look at your paycheck and you start adding up, okay, now in some of these states with these premiums going up, some of these people, at least 50% of their income is going to have to go to a healthcare premium.
Yep.
And we haven't even talked about them paying their rent, putting food on their table, putting their kids through school. We haven't talked about any of this stuff. We're just talking about being able to wake up, breathe air, have a beating heart, have legs and arms that work, and be able to go around and do what we need to do free of interference from, morbidity. But again, I don't know how this is something that is able to be miscommunicated and obfuscated so efficiently when it's something that affects all of us. That's the part that I just have such a difficult time understanding, because no matter who we are over the course of our lifespan, we have to come in contact with the healthcare industry in some way, or someone in our family does.
I got to be honest, I'm not looking forward to it, but you're absolutely right. But it leads me to this next thought, though, because I just saw this report out that there's a study out that says Trump's making us sick. Evidently, there's been something published in the New England Journal of Medicine that looks at this growing body of research on how these big political events, be it 9/11, be it World War II, whatever, or Trump being elected, changes our thinking and emboldens certain behavior. And I guess it's another one of these things where we already know this. There's that common sense component to where if you've got somebody who's running as a racist, all the racists are going to feel like, hey, let's get on the bandwagon. But all of this stuff, all of this hatred, all of this mean-spiritedness, all of this me-first kind of thinking, I think is really destroying.
And I think nothing sort of illustrates that better than the fact that the people who are going to be most detrimentally affected by the repeal of Obamacare and this death panel bill that they're trying to pass now are the people who voted for Trump. People who are in rural communities, people who belong to the white working class. The other studies that have come out that have been very alarming in recent years are that the life expectancy, in particular for white Americans, is decreasing, and that the rates of suicide and unintentional death by overdose on these prescription pills and self-inflicted gun violence, that there is a crisis going on within the very communities that are actually voting for more crisis. And that's the part that's so dangerous about it, because the very people who sort of need to be saved, I think, most imminently from these policies are the people who are voting for the policies. And so if you can't get them to see their own, self-preservation as more important than furthering, this culture and this idea of, make America great again, which is actually, just like an oxymoron at this point. That the scary part is that the stress of all of this is actually killing us. I actually read an article that's very similar to what you're talking about. That was the title, that stress is literally killing us. And it is the anxiety, the stress over how am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay for my medications? People who are in chronic pain, people who are now out in the streets trying to buy heroin so that they can, feed their opiate dependence. And this is what's happening in the heart of GOP values. And unfortunately, those representatives who are supposed to be helping these people are acting like none of this is even happening, and that you can just do, whatever they say do, and everything's just going to be great and it's going to just be fine.
And I would argue not just that it's not happening, that they just don't care. That even in the rhetoric, that there's the deserving and the undeserving, and in the dehumanization of people who have addiction problems or people who are born into poverty. It just seems to be this mean-spiritedness that it's just gripped us as a country.
Like Kellyanne Conway said yesterday, that it's
everyone
okay
gets health insurance like you and I do, Jane. Everyone gets health insurance. Just go get a job. It's that simple.
Yeah, everybody can just go get a job. I mean, but hello, where is all these jobs? And again, why are we assuming that every job there is in America offers health insurance? Why are we assuming that the very first day that you sign on to that job that you have automatic health insurance? Why are we acting like there typically isn't a 90-day waiting period, or in some cases, some people have to wait 9 months to a year before they get coverage.
Yep. And what about the pre-existing conditions that, I've heard people say, I got a job, but the insurance doesn't cover, this or that. Now, again, this was pre-Obamacare, and I think it's easy to forget just how bad it was before. Look, I wasn't a huge fan of the Affordable Care Act. It should have gone much farther, public option minimum, but people forget 55 million uninsured, pre-existing conditions, rescission. You go down the list, caps. You go down the list of all this stuff. I think we've as a nation, we've got a serious case of amnesia.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. We've got amnesia, and we also, there's sort of this apathy that comes from like a disbelief that they could really do this. Like they can't really do that. No, they really can do that. During the election, there were a lot of people, the media was sort of, to some degree picking up on like the hypocrisy of, like, for instance, senior citizens that were voting GOP, even though they were saying that they were wanting to cut Medicare and wanting to cut Social Security. And those people would say, well, they're just saying they're not really going to do that. And I don't know what it is about those people that they don't want to believe literally what the guys are actually saying to them in their face every day.
Yeah. And have always wanted. I mean, you look at Medicaid. I mean, to be honest, they never wanted Medicaid, and they've been working or Medicare, and they've been working to destroy it all along. So when they get the opportunity, are you surprised that they take it? And to highlight what you just said, on Election Day, I was handing out literature for a friend, and I actually talked to a guy who was on a breathing machine. That he had one of those portable oxygen masks and all this.
Yeah.
And he was in his late 50s, early 60s. And I said, who pays for that? He goes, he gets it through Medicaid. And I go, are you kidding me? Please give me your email address. Give me your contact information. Give me something. And I had this conversation. Please. So when they destroy it and they literally take the air out of your nose and you can't breathe, I want to be standing there to say, I told you so.
Yeah. Yeah. But see, he's under the illusion that it's just going to affect those people, quote unquote. And so again, they are able to do this bait and switch and convince these people to vote for these cuts and to vote for this really draconian agenda, because they are still believing that they are going to still be, the best treated hostages at the robbery, and that somehow, And again, I don't know why these people don't seem to grasp the fact that the same welfare that they're wanting to be cut, that they actually are on that welfare, that the Social Security, the Medicaid, the Medicare, all of that. Yes, they paid into it. Yes, it's taxes, and you earned it. But how can it be something that you earned because of what you did, but then for the other people it's an entitlement and it's a handout and they don't really deserve it? So again, this is very much, what we call the narcissism of minor differences, and that people are sort of able to see themselves as more deserving, or somehow going to be saved or immune to the worst of what happens. But unfortunately, they're just kind of lying to themselves.
It's scary stuff. Last question that I've got for you then, because I mean, I'm looking at where we're heading, and all of this, this anger, all of this stress, all of this tension, and it's every day, and it's building, and it's getting worse. Be it the Russia stuff, be it the healthcare stuff, be it the coming tax cuts and the budget tax cuts that are coming. All of this, what do we do? How do we fend this off?
I think Nancy Pelosi said it best that we have to keep telling our stories. And we have to keep, making ourselves seen. I was really moved by the disabled protesters that were at Mitch McConnell's office.
Yeah, the ADAPT people.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week, and I think as much as we can draw from them and see that even with all of the obstacles that they assuredly had to face to even get up to the Capitol and get into that office and do what they did, their lives are on the line and they are behaving as such, and they're going and they're talking to their representatives, and they are not allowing themselves to be ignored. And I think that story is going to be something that is always tied to Trump here. No matter what happens, just the indignity and the inhumanity of wheeling people out, dragging people out, pulling them out of their wheelchairs, handcuffing them in their wheelchairs, for simply just trying to survive, for simply just trying to tell their story of, this is what's going to happen to me. My freedom, my life, my quality of life is in jeopardy. My health is in jeopardy. Simply because of these callous actions that you don't have to take.
Yep.
This is something you don't have to do. And you're doing it anyway, despite this mounting opposition. And I think the more and more that we can continue to follow their example, and to be brave and to be courageous and continue to tell our stories, because the reality is there. As a physician, I know that the reality is there. I work in one of the most uninsured counties in America, and I see it every time I go to work. I cannot escape it. It's not something that will ever go away in my daily life. And so as much as I see it, I talk about it. And so that's what I would just encourage people to do, is just to find people who can support you and who can share your message and be advocates for each other, because they're not looking out for us. We have to look out for ourselves.
Absolutely. Jane, I appreciate the time. Great talk with you. Thanks so much.
All right. You have a great week. Thank you.
You as well. Always great to talk with our good friend Propane Jane. Share your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're on the road to nowhere.
Sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but know they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So don't know if you saw it over the weekend in Washington, D.C. Big, gigantic, huge anti-sanity rallies. The alt-right pro-Trump rallies that went on drew about 75 people to both of the big rallies. In fact, there were reports have it as twice as many people mocking them as actually showed up. At least that's a step in the right direction. Maybe we help. Let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. Victoria, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you.
So it looks like the Supreme Court is Kennedy retiring? I'm seeing stories on both sides. What's the latest?
No, we don't know yet. That's the one thing we don't know. I mean, we know a lot. We know a lot of things about rulings, but we don't know about Kennedy yet.
All right, what's coming?
Okay, the Supreme Court partially revised President Trump's travel ban and said the justices will hear arguments in the fall.
All right.
The justices said the ban can apply for now only to people who don't have a credible claim of a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the United States. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch said they would have let the entire ban take effect immediately. Not
surprising.
He is also, Gorsuch, and I have to check which ruling this was, has come out on the conservative side of another ruling that was slanted. So he's coming out as a very conservative justice.
And there's no surprise there.
Right. No surprise there, but he is coming out very conservative. So the travel ban is partially in effect, and they will hear arguments in the fall. Also, we have got a shuffling around. I mean, I've got so many rulings. I'm drowning.
Yeah,
drowning in rulings, I tell you.
It's Monday.
I know, it's Monday. Okay. Well, first of all, they said they would not hear two key cases surrounding the Second Amendment. One case centered on California's concealed carry law that allows sheriffs to require individuals applying for concealed carry permits to cite a need for the permit, such as feeling threatened, according to Washington Post. Second case dealt with the federal law that bans felons from possessing guns. That was anyway, Thomas and Gorsuch said that the court should have taken the California case.
Because we want everyone packing heat, Victoria. Everyone should be concealing it right in their underwear band. And for a lot of those, those guys, a lot of them maybe store it in the front so when it goes off, it never mind.
Now, the Supreme Court stepped into a clash that pits gay rights against religious freedoms, agreeing to hear arguments from a Colorado baker who says he should not have to make cakes for same-sex weddings. They will review a finding that Jack Phillips and his bakery were violating Colorado's civil rights laws, which ban sexual orientation discrimination by businesses that sell to the public. So that's a big one. The big one is where's the other one? Oh yes, this is a big one. This is that churches are eligible for some public funds.
No, that should never happen. That should never happen. That was, if I remember right, it was Madison, right, who vetoed the idea that public money should be going into the hands of churches.
Well, the court ruled decisively today that religious institutions should be eligible to receive funds for purely secular purposes, like playgrounds. The justices ruled 7-2.
Okay, so does that mean that that anybody can go on the public playgrounds and they can? It's a free space, or is it still owned by the religious entity?
Well, I guess it's still owned by the religious entity, but I don't know whether there's a 12-foot wall with spikes or dogs around it. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Well, it'll be fun and interesting to watch this play out.
Yes. Now, the dissenters in this, Chief Justice Roberts wrote the decision. Only Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor dissented. Elena Kagan went with the majority on this. The justices ruled that Missouri stretched the constitutional separation of church and state too far by declaring a Lutheran church ineligible to receive a competitive state grant for playground resurfacing. And the decision could have implications for more than 30 states that block public funds from going to religious organizations. It is interesting. So Elena Kagan went with them, and I believe that one of the two dissenters read her dissent from the bench, which is a big deal, as you know.
That is a big deal.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things, when they do that, it usually comes back around to where all of their concerns are basically what we end up living through. So good stuff. I mean, I'm thrilled to hear that we're going to make gay bashing great again. I'm thrilled to know that my tax dollars are going to be going to who knows which religious institution now. That's just great stuff.
Here's one.
Thanks for that.
The Supreme Court ruled for same-sex couples who complained an Arkansas birth certificate law discriminated against them. The justices issued an unsigned opinion reversing an Arkansas High Court ruling that upheld the law, which under this law, married lesbian couples had to get a court order to have both spouses listed as parents on their children's birth certificates. Arkansas routinely lists a woman's husband as a child's father, even if he is not the biological parent of the child. The same-sex couples want the same presumption applied to the married partner of a woman who gives birth to a child.
That's it.
The court ruled for the same-sex couples.
That's interesting. I'm actually surprised at that.
There you go. So it wasn't all darkness for you.
And where did Gorsuch end up on that?
It was an unsigned order.
Oh, okay. So we don't actually know.
We don't
and
know.
now let's get to the big thing. The death care bill, or the better health care bill.
Ah, yes. Nancy Pelosi said today that hundreds of thousands of people will die.
I'm not even going that far. I've seen numbers between 17,000 and 55,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that this was a helpful comment by
a bit hyperbolic, but look,
Pelosi, it's going to come back and haunt her.
Well, she does that a lot. Hey, the more you read it, the more you read about it, the more you'll like it.
She started by saying on CBS, "We do know that many poor people, millions, hundreds of thousands of people will die if this bill passes." So, yeah, that's going to be used.
Yeah, that'll be an ad. But the thing is she's right. People are going to die because of this, and just because it's a hyperbolic, extreme statement doesn't mean it isn't actually true for a good number of people. And that's the scary thing about this with me, because we get into these discussions of the extremes instead of what actually is.
Well, Reuters is reporting per a Senate aide that a revised version of the bill is coming out today.
Wow.
With some changes.
So there was some discussion because this was the discussion draft, and now they're going to make it worse. Is that what? Is that?
Well, obviously the revisions are designed to appease the various senators who have oppositions. Oh, and President Trump is saying, is this a new statement I think we're going to get there? Because that's a little different from what he said in his tweet today.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's as of yesterday, he said. Oh, yeah, that's what he said yesterday. Because in his tweet today, he seemed to be indicating. Did you see any of his tweets this morning? I know you read them diligently.
It's what I wake up every day looking at.
Well, he tweeted, I thought interestingly today, let me just go to real Donald Trump, who I follow, along with Grumpy Cat and various other people. Republican senators are working very hard to get there with no help from the Democrats. Not easy. Perhaps just let Obamacare crash and burn.
And I've been saying all along, that's the game plan. They've already done enough to destroy the Obamacare. They've already done enough by defunding the ratings pools and really giving the insurance industry the scare of going, you know what, we're not going to be left holding the bag. We're bailing now.
Well, I think the indication to me from that tweet, analyzing it, is that he's looking at this on a Monday and saying, if this thing doesn't go down the way I want it to, I'm blaming Democrats now.
Well, they're going to blame Democrats. They're going to blame Obama for everything anyway, so there's no surprise there at all. Now, it's interesting to me that they went after Heller, and you look at this America First PAC or whatever they are, attacking him in his home district. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
It will be. Very. Very.
Wow, we are really in I mean, I look at this and I go, how is it possible anyone with a straight face could go, this is something good? I mean, I'm struggling so much with this healthcare bill.
It's interesting. I was watching some debate on CNN this morning, and there was somebody who used to be a communications or something analyst for Senator Ted Cruz, who was saying, basically seemed to be acknowledging that the bill couldn't do everything for everybody. And you almost had to pick who you were going to help.
Yeah, you're going to tax
the
cuts.
impression I got.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, we know what it is. It's a giant sloppy wet kiss to the wealthy in the country. And you know what? We're going to kill off the surplus population on the other end. Win-win on the conservative side. Simple stuff. Victoria, I appreciate the thoughts and more great stuff out of the Supreme Court. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
As always, Victoria Jones. And look, that's the thing. I mean, we do know who their priorities skew towards, and it's not you and me. It's not we the people. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, this week we're going to spend some time talking to the candidates in the Wisconsin 1 district, Speaker Ryan's district. Those people who tried to unseat him. Quick break. Right back.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. California Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, a Democrat, has blocked the Medicare for All single-payer universal health care bill. The bill passed the California Senate. The California Nurses Association, National Nurses United, and Senator Bernie Sanders are calling on Speaker Rendon to stop blocking the health care bill. Sanders says he's extremely disappointed that California Assembly Speaker Rendon is not allowing that Medicare for All bill to come to a vote. The California Nurses Association is condemning Rendon's action, quote, to destroy the aspirations of millions of Californians for guaranteed health care without being bankrupted or forced to skip needed care, end quote. The Nurses Union says that Rendon acted in the interests of the profiteering insurance companies, abandoning people already threatened by Congress and the Trump administration's actions on health care. Deborah Berger, co-president of the California Nurses Association, says thousands of Californians have been in motion for guaranteed health care, and they are not finished. The AFL-CIO is launching an ad campaign against the Republican health care bill nationally that kicks millions off coverage so the wealthy can get tax breaks. Here's an audio excerpt from an AFL-CIO video criticizing the GOP bill.
The law will make health care more expensive for everyday Americans and transfer the money meant for us to the richest 1%. Boiled down, it's just a tax break for CEOs and corporations. Why should hardworking Americans give up the freedom that comes from having affordable health care so the rich can get richer? Our children and aging parents are more important than the wealthiest 1%.
Jobs allegedly saved by Trump have a short shelf life. 700 workers at the Carrier Company in Indianapolis will begin getting layoff notices in July. Trump claimed to have saved 1,100 jobs at Carrier, but United Steelworkers Local 1999 says he never saved that many. Carrier is shifting production from Indianapolis to Mexico. The United Auto Workers say that a U.S. Supreme Court decision not to take a case regarding union organizing at Macy's should persuade VW to drop its anti-union court case. The NLRB has ordered Volkswagen to negotiate with UAW Local 42 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a small skilled trades unit of the union. VW refuses, maintaining that if a union election is held, all the workers in the plant should be included in the bargaining unit and in the election. It's essentially the same argument Macy's made when the Supreme Court decided not to take the case. UAW Secretary-Treasurer Gary Castile says the UAW is renewing its call for VW to drop its, quote, frivolous appeal and meet employees at the bargaining table in Chattanooga, end quote. WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
Right there, the Republican Party platform. I want it all. I want it now. I look at this horrible health care bill, the Paul Ryan health care bill, the Republican Party's platform health care bill. This is their priority, folks. And to me, the number one issue in this next election cycle is making those pushing this poison accountable, making those who pushed this ideology of destroying Medicaid, of destroying health insurance, of harming the many at the expense, well, at our expense to enrich the few, should be held accountable. And nowhere in this country is that more important than in Wisconsin's 1st congressional district, Paul Ryan's congressional district, which is why this week we're going to talk to all of the declared candidates about their positions, what their vision is, and why Paul Ryan's got to go. And I've got one of those candidates, David Yankovich, is my understanding, the first declared candidate in that district. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, Rick. How are you?
I'm not good. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm ticked off. I look at this monstrosity, this horrible piece of steaming garbage, and I'm ticked off today. Can you tell?
I can. Good. Stay ticked off. That's what we need. Wisconsin is ground zero. This district's ground zero, the center of the political universe right now. And gerrymandering, and healthcare, just about everything that's happening in this country, this state is where it's coming from, where the test cases are. Stay mad. Stay engaged.
Now, I've been saying for a while, David, that this health care bill, this is the brainchild of the Ryans, and we have to take those people have to go. They're not in the mainstream of political thought. These extremists, these radicals, they've got to go, which is why I'm glad to see that there are people ready to take him on. Tell me your thoughts on what a health care bill should look like. Well,
first of all, he has to go for sure. And that's why I took up my entire life and moved here to do it. The health care bill, in my eyes, it should be Medicare for all. Everybody should be on Medicare. It's pretty simple. We can get more creative with it if we want to, but I want to see everybody in this country be able to go to the doctor and be able to be seen. If something happens and you're in a horrible car accident or you get cancer or whatever life throws at you, you don't have to also worry about the crippling deaths that are coming with these. I mean, there was just a mother who went viral posting her son's open heart surgery bill, and it was $800,000 or something. And if she wouldn't have had health care, she'd be bankrupt. And then, of course, I've shared my story with your listeners before, but, just last month, month and a half ago now, my mom went into a coma and she was in the ICU, and, 18 days, and insurance companies are trying to influence and force their way into me making a decision based on my financial future by letting my mother go. So, I mean, my vision for this is that, everybody's on Medicare. Everybody has coverage.
And by let her go, you mean?
They wanted me to remove her from the machine and let her die. And they said that if she would have, David, the best case scenario is if she comes off of this, she'll be brain dead. Worst case scenario, she'll be with the mentality of a 6-year-old child who won't, be able to function. That was what the options were. And they said, so basically you really don't have a choice in this matter. Like, there's not one good option. But they couldn't give me a definitive answer on how much damage was done. So I gave her a chance to fight, and she came back from it. Now I'm talking to her for an hour, 2 hours a day. she's 100% back. And had I listened to him, she'd be dead. And it would have been my fault. And I'd have to live with that.
And nobody should have to go through that. But, here's the thing. We hear a lot from the right wing. We don't want government between you and your doctor. Yet I keep asking that question. Do we want insurance companies who have a profit motive between me and my doctor, or you and your mother's doctors? I mean, or influencing the doctors. Because, we just talked to Propane Jane a minute ago who said, look, I'm making decisions on what drugs to administer and what things to do based on whether these folks can afford it. That's insane.
Yeah. That's exactly where we are. But, the thing is the Republican Party always wants to go back to the past. And this is one of those times where, let's do it. Let's go back to the past. Let's go back to pre-1973 when we had community hospitals, when the insurance companies didn't rule the game, and it wasn't, guys who were bean counters and they're counting how much money they can make off of it. When it wasn't privatized, it was a community hospital where you went there and it was a doctor who ran the hospital and made those decisions, not an insurance company. They want to go to the past so bad, let's do it. Let's go back to the past and go there then.
No, I'm all in favor of the idea of community hospitals and the community taking care of itself. That just seems like sane, rational thought. But, you look at this healthcare bill. There isn't a lot of sane, rational thought in it. It's about, again, it's a huge, huge tax break. And then, put this on top of the tax break that we're giving them by killing people with the healthcare bill. Then they're going to get an actual tax cut that they're looking for, and a budget that's going to do another tax cut. If there's any reason for someone like Paul Ryan to be thrown out of Congress, I got 1, 2, and 3.
In this district right here, there are, and then this is a tweet that I just had a while ago, but there are 307,000 people with pre-existing conditions under 65. There are 710,000 people in my district. Almost half of my district already is basically going to see premiums go up by 750%, or they're not going to have coverage at all. That's half of the district, and that's not even including the people who are over 65 with pre-existing conditions. That's not counting all the other issues that happen. We're looking at a lot of really horrible stuff here if this thing goes through. And the Republican Party and Paul Ryan is the architect. That's why he's the architecture of this bill. And I came to take him out because my mom got sick and I got mad enough. But it's the entire party. We need a blue wave in 2018 because it's not just Paul Ryan. It is every single Republican willing to vote for this piece of trash.
Yep. And it's the ideology. And look, I appeal to the sane and rational among the GOP ranks and say, look, take your party back somewhere to sanity. Because personally, I don't know many people who are going, screw those poor people, let them die. We need tax cuts for the rich. I don't know that. I don't know people who are saying, hey, we need more tax cuts for the wealthy and the heck with the infrastructure and the heck with education. I don't know those people. But
those voters didn't vote for that. I talk to Republicans every day, and, they voted for jobs. And this is also a job killer. It's going to be an economy killer. It really will be. It's political rhetoric. This is really happening. I mean, if you have people who are this much in debt, they're not going to be able to afford to go to work, because they're going to be too sick from being in the hospital. It's just, it's going to hurt the economy. I read something that's going to be like $1 billion or something in the next 5 years, and over the next 10, it's going to be 10 billion or 10 trillion, something like that. It's going to be an economy crusher.
Yeah. And
it's not even just people's lives that are going to be lost. That's what we're screaming about, because however, money's money, but you can't put the value of someone's life on the line. But that's what we're looking at here. It's horrible.
It's just crazy. And at the end of it, you've got to look at the people in the ideology who are bringing this. Because I saw a report that said, somewhere between 500,000 and 1.3 million jobs are going to be lost because of this. And you start going, you're right. It's an economy crusher on so many levels. And, these are the people who told us they're the business people. They know how to run an economy. They know how to run it right into the ground. Let me ask you a couple of questions on different topics, because we put it out to the Twitter sphere to say, hey, what should we ask the candidates in the 1st Congressional District there in Wisconsin? And we got a whole bunch of responses. One of them by Dawn. She tweets, what's your number one hot button issue, and how do you plan to negotiate support for it across the aisle?
That's a really good question. Don, my number one hot button issue is health care. not just because the healthcare debate's going on right now, but because my mother's story and what happened before that, my high button issue is science. So right now, what we have to do, we have to take back Congress. We have to be able to start fighting for our turf back again. To reach across the aisle, I don't know what the Republicans are going to be willing to do in 2018, but I know if we pick up 300 seats or 200 seats, we're in a much better bargaining place and place to negotiate than we are right now, where everything's just getting forced down our throat.
Yeah.
I want to work with Republicans, of course, to strengthen the health care bill that we already have, but I don't know what they're going to be willing to do. I really don't. So right now, my goal is just to keep people alive and fight for everybody.
And for me, my point would be just to get Paul Ryan out as the symbolism with ousting him in that ideological position, I think is so important, which is why I think this is the national race of this election cycle.
This election, Paul Ryan is going down. We have three amazing candidates. I mean, everybody's strong in different ways, all working together to take him down. This isn't like other elections. There's a lot of artillery that's in here. This is ground zero for the biggest race in the country, and we are going to take him down this time. This isn't like an if or, how are we going to do it? We are, and all of us are committed to doing that.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with David Yankovich. If you want to check out his website, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just go to davidyankovich.com. Terry tweets, what's your position on funding charters and vouchers with public money intended for public schools that serve all children? Curious your thought.
I'm all for public education. I don't like when we have private schools and it goes from public money. I think that's a cop-out. You have to invest in the education that you have. Our schools right now have textbooks from 1920, 1930, sometimes the 60s and the 70s, and they're so far behind. We have to invest in public education. It's one of the bigger issues that I want to talk about here coming up, especially as we get into the fall. But in terms of charter school, that I feel like that is a way for politicians to say that they're going to cop out on the issue. Rather than put it into public school funding, they would rather put in their, the charters.
Yeah. And my thought's always been, this is that first step towards privatizing the public education system. And I've always said if the working class of this country loses public education and it's based on, whatever criteria they throw out to us, you look at Betsy DeVos saying she wouldn't go after an Indiana school because they would discriminate against the child who may have a relative in the house who may be of the LGBT community is just insane to me. But again, it's about dividing, conquering, privatizing. It's just, to me, that simple. Another question, Brown-tailed Hawk asks, do recent Democratic losses in Michigan and Wisconsin have a lot to do with right-to-work laws and anti-union measures? Curious your thought.
Absolutely, they do. Absolutely, because our messaging isn't as good as the Republicans. Scott Walker, went straight to war with right to work. It was a big issue here. And then they were able to convince Republican voters that it was Obama's fault. So, absolutely, these issues that you're seeing and the losses that we're seeing in these have to do with those, but not for the reasons that you would think. Democrats have to get better on their messaging. You have to have a singular message. If you talk to a Republican right now and you ask them what they stand for, they'll tell you exactly what it is. But Democrats, they'll tell you a list of 15 pages of what it is. And we have to be able to sell it more, especially to Republican voters. So that's what I do. I go around and I talk to Republican voters and I ask them questions. And actually, I just had this conversation last night with somebody who she was telling me that she lost her job 1 month into Obama taking office in 2009, and she blamed him for her job loss. She was in construction, and I tried to explain the housing crisis and how the economy was and everything. But the Republicans are so good at selling their message that she thought that was Obama's fault. So, absolutely those losses have to do with that, but for different reasons.
Let me ask you the part of this, because, Wisconsin is, again, on so many fronts, ground zero to a lot of the horrible things that have happened in this country. And all of the attacks on workers and on labor unions, the most recent major attacks started in Wisconsin back in 2011 and have spread like a cancer across this country. What's your position on labor unions?
labor is the backbone of this country, and I'm not saying that as a political soundbite. It really is. You know, I know one of my primary opponents is, you know, a real big labor guy, and I appreciate that. So am I. I'm just not in a union. I grew up in a family of union members, but we wouldn't have the 40-hour work week. We wouldn't have the child labor laws that we do. We wouldn't have the minimum wage requirement. None of that would be here without unions and the fights that they put through for the last century. We have to back them up. We have to help them strengthen. We have to do everything in our power to get them back to where they were before.
You know, I look at this, David, and I'm hoping 2018 is a moment where a lot of working class values come back to the forefront, that we educate our children, we give people health care from cradle to grave to ensure that nobody falls through the cracks. And again, as I've said a number of times, my hope for President Obama was that reward to work, that, you know, if you work hard, you play by the rules, that you actually do get ahead. And I would like to see some bit of strengthening of our labor laws, because look, at the end of the day, if you can't afford to put food on the table and a roof over your head, I don't believe you can participate in our democracy.
That's all anybody wants. Like, nobody cares about me being Republican or Democrat when I'm out once we start talking. Everybody wants to know, how are you going to help me feed my kids? How am I going to keep a roof over my head? You know, how am I going to be able to afford to live? I mean, those are the questions that you get. You don't get no one really cares about the D or R next to your name. And the Democrats' message for so many years has been in so many different places. We have to get back on a really strong, good message. And one of those messages that we need to have is, we're for unions. We're for workers' rights. You know, we are for helping and strengthening this. And I mean, you're absolutely right, Rick. I mean, we have to strengthen those laws and fight for unions again. And the Democratic Party, they walked away from that. They went to Wall Street instead of being, you know, with the people who created Wall Street and built Wall Street. And I want to take us back there.
The website, davidyankovich.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. David, I wish you nothing but the best, and everyone the best, because, again, this to me is the race to watch. This is the symbolic race, if you will. This is important. Oh, this is the biggest race in the country. It's the most important one, even for the symbolism of it. Just taking down the speaker, you know. Yep. Give us a final thought. Final thought. Right now, this health care bill is hanging in the balance. If everybody's out there and picks up their phones and calls their senator's office, it will make a huge difference. They are tracking these numbers. They're tracking the votes. If you have a senator who is on the fence, definitely call him. If you want to go to his office, and, peacefully, and tell them that you're against it. This is the most important bill, because people literally will die if we let this thing pass. So that's the most important thing right now today. David, I appreciate it. Best of luck, man. Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye. Great talking with you, David Yankovich. Again, if you want to check out his website, davidyankovich.com, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com of how you can get involved. Again, so important. Quick break. Right back. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. This is the fate of the American dream. I got no time now to go and cry now. Before I take a shot, don't want to go for. I'm still searching for my dignity. This is the fate of the American dream. This is the fate of the American dream. This is the fate of the American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that Illinois Governor John Peter Altgeld pardoned Samuel Fielden, Oscar Neebe, and Michael Schwab, who were imprisoned for their alleged role in the Haymarket bombing of 1886. 8 men had been accused of throwing a bomb at a workers' rally in Chicago. 4 were hung. 1 died in prison before he could be executed, and 3 were incarcerated. Governor Altgeld had been born in Germany. He was a progressive leader who helped pass worker safety laws and child labor laws. Efforts to free the 3 Haymarket prisoners had been underway since their sentencing. During the trial, there was no physical evidence linking any of the accused men to the crime. Governor Altgeld agreed to look into the case. He issued a report outlining his findings. At the end, he concluded, quote, "The trial was not fair." He wrote, quote, "I'm convinced that it is clearly my duty to act I grant an absolute pardon to Samuel Fielden, Oscar Neebe, and Michael Schwab this 26th day of June, 1893. This pardon came just one day after a monument to the martyrs was dedicated at the cemetery where the 5 martyrs were buried. Today, part of Governor Altgeld's pardon is inscribed on a plaque on the backside of that monument. Governor Altgeld paid a political price for the pardon. He was attacked by the press. The Chicago Tribune attacked his German heritage, declaring there was, quote, not a drop of true American blood in his veins. He does not reason like an American, does not feel like one, and consequently does not behave like one. In 1896, he lost his bid at re-election for standing up for justice. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Yes, I do. I know who the enemy is, and I know where he has to go. Look, at the end of the day, Paul Ryan is in this vein, the enemy. The Republican ideology, this fetish, this obsession with feeding the wealthy at the expense of the very poor, at the downtrodden. And look, this is one of those things I said over the weekend. Maybe it's just easier to kick somebody when they're down because they're down there anyway. It's kind of hard to kick someone that you put up on a pedestal. And the weird thing is, I had a conversation with Senator Bob Casey over the weekend where he said, look, the rich people don't even want this tax cut. They want to stop being the target of all of the attacks. They want to pay their fair share. They don't even want this tax cut. And yet the Republican machine is so invested in feeding just a handful of their donors that, if the surplus population dies off, so much be it. Which is why, again, I keep coming back to, Ryan's district is the national district. This is a race everybody should be paying attention to. And look, I understand there are 3 great candidates, and this week we've invited all of them onto the program. Tomorrow, Kathy Myers is going to be here. She's, I guess, from what I understand, a school board president, a school board member there in Wisconsin, and someone who, healthcare front and center, education front and center. So it'll be interesting to talk to her. We've also reached out to Randy Bryce to talk about his campaign. And I understand there are probably going to be a couple more people throwing in because this is such an important campaign. This is such an important race. This is such an important seat. Just the symbolism of it, of taking down the mastermind of what really has been a lot of poisonous policy. You look at the Ryan budget, you look at the Ryan care, you look at all of this Ayn Rand kind of nonsense of this ultra-libertarian, mean kind of thinking. And to take him out and send him packing would send really a message across the country that tried it, didn't work, done, let's move on. Let's start talking about how we unite the country, how we pull people together, and how we make sure that everyone does better. Because we know when everyone does better, everyone does better. Common sense. And, for me, it's just that crystal clear. Because, again, I've met no one who looks at this healthcare bill and says, this is good. No one. Even some of the most diehard Republicans are looking at it going, I don't know. We need that safety net. We need something. Bad things happen to good people. I mean, you can't demonize everyone that something bad has happened to. And this idea that, of the deserving and the undeserving. Those children who are born with cancer or born with heart defects or born with, whatever deformity. Is it their fault? And they should not get, because, hey, they're born with it. It's a pre-existing condition. They're never going to get coverage? This is where when you start piecemealing things together and start instead of saying, you know what, it's a right. You have when you get arrested, you got a right to see a lawyer. When you get sick, you should have the right to see a doctor. That simple. And the idea of Medicare for all makes perfect sense. We say if you're lucky enough to get to 65, we'll take care of you. But before then, screw you? Is that the message? Does that fit on a bumper sticker? If you get to 65, or I think I'm going to be 67, because I think they raise it. But if you can get to this magic age, then you get health care. But at 66, 64, sorry, brother. Is that it? It seems to me the sane, rational thing to do would be to, as some libertarians have even said, maybe put on a federal tax, like other countries do. And, pay for it that way. Because look, healthcare is going to cost. It's going to cost money. Maybe stop giving the tax credits that we give out to employers. Maybe undo employer-based healthcare. Because it's always been insane to me that my healthcare is tied to where I work. And if I'm fortunate enough to work for a good union company, as I did for many years, and have the best healthcare, better than probably even members of Congress, just because of where I work, that's wrong. Because there are a lot of people who weren't fortunate enough to get those jobs. And they should get secondary care? It's nuts. It is absolutely nuts. But it's the system that's been shoved down our throats. The idea of employer-based care has just been nuts to me. I'm interested in your thoughts. Tweet me at Rick Smith Show. Send me an email, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear it. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to talk about how did the Sunday shows deal with the healthcare issue? How did the pundits come around dealing with it? Media Matter is going to be here to share some of their thoughts. Quick break. Right back.
I'll never turn. I'll never bend. I'm with you now. Until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
What's the matter with these people? The Trumpsters in the White House and Congress, I mean. Start with the Donald himself. What's wrong with him that he would require the top officials of his government to humiliate themselves publicly, making them try to outdo each other in a groveling worship-a-thon of praise for his magnificence? On June 12th, at the first meeting of his full cabinet, including the Vice President, Treasury Secretary, Secretary of State, and all the other supposedly powerful luminaries of the government of the United States of America, all were called upon to say their name, then meekly offered their smarmiest praise of Trump's integrity, agenda, and manly leadership. He even had it televised. This spectacle of forced adulation of the leader was so eerily insane that even North Korea's Kim Jong-un would have been too embarrassed to orchestrate it. Yet Trump wasn't satiated by superlatives from his cabinet of sycophants. Instead, he publicly stroked his own ego with the fanciful claim that Americans are, quote, seeing amazing results from his presidency. Shifting into overdrive, the chief proclaimed that, quote, never has there been a president, except maybe FDR, who passed more legislation, who's done more things than what we've done. No, Mr. President, not actually, not even close. I realize you don't believe in facts, but here's one to sober you up. The Trump White House has produced no major legislation. None. Zero. This is Jim Hightower saying, you're right, however, that we Americans are seeing truly amazing results from your 6 months on the job. We're amazed that in such a short time, your so-called presidency is mired in conflicts of interest, constitutional quagmires, erratic behavior, ideological arrogance, and tweeted ignorance, lame policy proposals, and, let's admit the obvious, your own incompetence.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show.
And welfare was
Check out the
a
website,
big mistake.
thericksmithshow.com. You know, you listen to that and wow. You know, we don't need food for children. We don't need health care, education. Heck with them. More for the wealthy, more for the 1%. It's just absolutely nuts. And you look at this death care bill, which, again, I can't believe, you know, there are people with straight faces going, this is good. We did our work. This is good. It's just nuts. And if you watch the Talking Head shows yesterday, it's just mind-blowing at how easily these folks regurgitate their talking points and lie with a straight face. Just crazy stuff. But here to talk about what happened then, the Sunday shows, and maybe what they didn't get to. We've asked Julie Alderman. She's the research coordinator there with Media Matters for America. Julie, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, I mean, is it just me? But, you know, I'm watching these shows and I'm going, Pat Toomey, how can you possibly look me in the face and lie to me and say that we're strengthening Medicaid? It's nuts.
Yeah, I think there's really an onus on the host to fact check, given that there are so many lies out there. But I think there's also one thing we've noticed is more obsession with the process, and the process is pretty bad. I mean, you had 13 men write this bill by themselves in a closed-door room.
Rich men, rich men, multi-millionaire men. Let's not forget that part.
And there's a lot of focus on that and vote counting, but not so much about the impact of what this bill will actually do. I mean, you saw yesterday there was little note of the impact this bill will have on the elderly, the impact it'll have on people with pre-existing conditions, and the impact of cuts to Planned Parenthood. I mean, there was just virtually none of that, which is just a disservice to your audience. I don't really care so much about, well, I do care. It's important how a certain senator votes and whether they have, 54 versus 55 or something, but I think the most pressing thing is people need to know how this is going to affect them and give them resources to understand really, healthcare is complicated.
It's so complicated that we can't have it in public. We can't have hearings because I think, as Ron Johnson said, we already know just about everything. And the problem, the system's broken because we want to give people who crash their car auto insurance.
It just none of these extended metaphors make any sense. And the process has been so secretive, and media also really failed to cover how secretive that was and just anything in this bill until Republicans said, okay, let's introduce it and let's scurry it towards a vote in 5 days, even though it's 1/6 of the economy and the biggest change we've seen in 8 years now.
But again, you listen to the rhetoric of the campaign. You listen to this was rammed down our throat. You listen to there was no input. You listen to all of this stuff, and it's like they didn't hear themselves for 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a common right-wing media myth that Obamacare was sort of shoved down everyone's throat and that it was, done in secret. And Nancy Pelosi said you have to pass it to know what's in it, which is taking her completely out of context. I mean, this is so common in right-wing media. It's ridiculous, and it's migrated to politicians. And actually, if you look back, the ACA was passed in one of the most transparent ways possible with hundreds of amendments and hearings and experts. But this is just, this is everything they've complained about for years.
Now, again, you go back to what you said at the very beginning, how this is going to affect people's lives. And we saw the images of the ADAPT people. And look, these are some of the most activist people that I've ever met. When the state of Pennsylvania was talking about cutting budgets for social services, the ADAPT people were here. I saw that they literally handcuffed people, quadriplegics in wheelchairs, because they had the audacity to say, look, I want to survive. I want to be able to have some measure of a standard of living. It's just crazy to me how this is all kind of played out.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, you see like little viral videos of, people explaining to their senators, but when you look at who's actually talking about this bill on television, it's a lot of white men, like the people who wrote the bill.
Now, how does this affect women? Because, I mean, part of it, there was a lot of talk about, especially during the Obama years, about contraception, about abortion, about, reproductive care. Anything in here that we didn't focus on? Because I don't think I heard much or anything in the coverage. Or is there just nothing in this discussion draft? And is that something they'll work out later?
So, cuts to Medicaid are huge for women. Women comprise the majority of Medicaid beneficiaries, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. And it treats a lot of things that women go through, including C-sections and menstrual irregularities, as a pre-existing condition that could be paid out of pocket. And you also see cutting Planned Parenthood, which they defunded completely in the House bill. In the Senate bill, it's a one-year funding freeze, federal funding, which, of course, does not go to abortions because of the Hyde Amendment. And that means that 15% of low-income people would lose out on care, according to the CBO. So you're seeing a disproportionate impact on women, and there's just, they're the minority of people that are being hosted on television to discuss this.
Yeah, well, we absolutely need more voices on this. Julie, I appreciate you taking some time for us, filling us on the thoughts. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Great talking with you. No, you look at this, and the reality is the voices that we're hearing are just so wow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You can hit us at Rick Smith Show on the Twitters. Quick break. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day the American Railway Union, led by Eugene V. Debs, voted to support the boycott of Chicago's Pullman Palace cars. The nation was gripped by an economic depression. The Pullman workers were on strike because the company had severely slashed their wages. But Pullman had not reduced the workers' rent payments in his company town. When the American Railway Union held its convention in Chicago that June, the Pullman workers attended. They were determined to win the union's support. One of the Pullman workers who spoke during the union's convention was a young woman named Jenny Curtis. Jenny was a seamstress at Pullman. Her father had also worked for the company for 13 years. He had grown ill and could not work during the final months of his life. He died owing $60 in back rent to the company. Jenny had to pay off his back rent along with her own board. Then, wages were slashed. Jenny became the leader of the ladies' union at Pullman Local 209. She addressed the railroad union meeting with passion and emotion, saying, "We struck at Mr. Pullman because we were without hope. We joined the American Railway Union because it gave us a glimmer of hope." 20,000 souls, men, women, and little ones, have their eyes turned toward this convention today. And thus, the merry war, the dance of skeletons bathed in human tears, goes on. And it will go on, brothers, forever, unless you, the American Railway Union, stop it, end it, crush it out. And so I say, come along with us for decent conditions everywhere. The American Railway Union voted to support the boycott, but the effort was brutally crushed by federal troops, resulting in the deaths of 24 workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states that are blockading Qatar have released a list of 13 demands to the country that must be accepted within 10 days. The first demand is to close the Qatari news network Al Jazeera, which employs some 3,000 journalists around the world. Qatar will also have to scale back its ties to Iran, which could be hard to accomplish. seeing the two countries jointly operate the world's largest natural gas field, which is located in the Persian Gulf. There are also demands to turn over prisoners, cut ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, detail the extremists that the country allegedly supports around the world, and pay up, sending an unspecified financial sum to the Saudis and their allies. The Qatari government hasn't responded to the list of demands yet, though its foreign minister said earlier in the week that closure of Al Jazeera was out of the question. And the U.S. has raised objection to a UN Human Rights Council resolution on the elimination of discrimination against women and girls, citing unacceptable language that listed abortion as an essential element of maternal health. 43 nations helped to draft the resolution, which called for new efforts to boost women's representation in government, to ensure that girls receive the same education as boys, and to, quote, promote, protect, and fulfill the right of all women to have full control over and decide freely and responsibly on matters related to their sexuality and sexual and reproductive health. That was the part the U.S. could not support. Here was U.S. diplomat Jason Mack.
Eliminating discrimination against women worldwide is a key foreign policy goal of the United States. The United States strongly supports the spirit of this resolution on the elimination of discrimination against women and girls. However, we must dissociate from operative paragraph 12 due to our concerns about issues related to reproductive rights.
For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Website, thericksmithshow.com. So, the Donald was going to be the savior of small communities across the country. He was going to reinvigorate the manufacturing, going to bring jobs back. Yet we find almost the kiss of death. Whenever Trump comes around, jobs seem to flee. In fact, you remember, Ford was going to stay. We're not moving to Mexico. We're going to build here. It turns out they're actually building them in China. You look at the Carrier plant, saved all those jobs. We gave Carrier a bit of money to automate. Well, those jobs are still going to Mexico. And you can go down the list. I mean, we've talked about a number of them. And, you know, the reality is, and this is one of those frustrating things, and this isn't new, so don't take it as I'm only pointing the finger at Donald Trump and only pointing the finger at today. You know, this has been going on as our economy has moved in this neoliberal kind of free trade mantra of, you know, we need to open up markets for our products. And I'm in favor of that. The problem is that mantra has turned into, well, we're going to trade jobs for cheap products. So we're going to ship a bunch of our jobs overseas, and then we'll get cheap plastic crap coming back. Which for a very short period of time actually was not a bad thing. Hey, we had a higher standard of living, still had good paying union jobs. We could afford to buy the crummy, the Datsuns and the Yugos and all of that stuff. And hey, you know, we had more money in our pocket, so we could consume other things. Now that's all going. You know, we're losing our manufacturing prowess. In fact, I was just talking with somebody over the weekend about the bridge in Trenton that says, you know, Trenton makes, the world takes. And I asked the simple question because the guy was from Trenton. I said, is that still the reality? I mean, you guys still make stuff. And he goes, not like we used to. And that's kind of the mantra all across this country. And it's only going to get worse. Because there's a bunch of reasons for job loss, trade policy being one of them, tax policy being another, and the growing of the internet and the consolidation of industries. And over the weekend, the New York Times had an interesting article. You know, they point out that, you know, in towns already hit by steel mill closings, there's a new casualty, and it's those jobs that replace them, the retail jobs today. You know, I go back to the Reagan years as we were losing steel jobs and manufacturing jobs, and they were moving people into all kinds of stuff. You know, in fact, I had one friend who went into being a tailor, even though simultaneously we were shipping those jobs overseas. And it comes back to this trade policy stuff. Because, you know, as they point out in this article, that, you know, as we lost those jobs, communities like Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is the one that they quote in the article, where you could get out of high school, you could go to the factory, get a good paying union job, you could work your life there, you could have vacations in the summer, go somewhere, you could have a nice little house, the 2 cars in the driveway, you could keep up with the Joneses, send the kids to college, their lives got a little bit better as they went off to do something else. It was that American dream. But the basis, the foundation, were those good paying union jobs. That's the foundation of all of this. The opportunity to get better means that the foundation, the bottom, the lower end of the socioeconomic scale is secure. That people can make a living, that they can not just survive, but thrive. And that you have that incentive, that little carrot out in front of them that makes them want to work harder. In the wheel, they're going a little bit faster to keep up. Because they want to get better. They want their kids to have more opportunities. They want a future that's brighter. What's happened, though, is as that manufacturing has gone, as that really prosperous working class job with health care, with a pension, with a future, as that's gone, now you see desperation. Now you see poverty. Now you see you're on this treadmill and you're at the edge of it, just about ready to fall off. And that creates all of this stress, all of this anger, all of this frustration. And now you're seeing, for instance, Amazon's killing a bunch of retail jobs. This behemoth is going to crush the retail sector. So all of those jobs that people got when they lost, whatever it was they did before, this is going to. And as they point out in the article, you're not going to get in these rural areas. Amazon doesn't put their distribution centers in rural areas. They put them in metropolitan areas of 250,000 or more. And it makes sense because, look, you want to be in a place that feeds the greatest demand. And if you want to do it quickly, you've got to be right there. Now, they point out that in rural communities in small metropolitan areas, you see about 23% of the traditional retail jobs in those areas. The e-commerce jobs only make up about 13% are in rural areas. So a massive job loss. What happens to these people? What happens to these folks as you see communities go from having, productive manufacturing, from having steel mills and manufacturing centers and good solid, kind of thriving main streets, to that of populations that are dwindling. You see we buy gold stores on the corner, or the dollar stores, or the addiction centers, or you see, because look, you drive through any community in this country, and all you have to do is look at the storefronts to know if that community is struggling or thriving. If you see payday lending, if you say, hey, we buy gold, if you see any of those places, that's a community that's in decline, that's struggling. And you look at this stuff and understand the rural communities went overwhelmingly for Trump because they're tired, they're angry, they're frustrated. That dream has been ripped away from them. And the reality is you have these communities who are going to be harmed even more by Trump policies. And again, I go back to why I think Paul Ryan's district is so important that we watch Paul Ryan's policies, taking Medicaid away from poor working class people, the retail industry, taking drug treatment away from poor people. Look at the attacks on Medicaid. Look at this horrible health care bill. As you go through this, the angering part of this is that the people that Trump claimed he was going to help. And look, there were things, and you can go back and listen to the tapes. There were things I said I would be willing to work with Donald Trump on. Manufacturing being one of them. Sane, rational trade policy. Revitalizing our urban areas and our rural communities. Investing in education, not privatizing, not the crazy direction he went with DeVos. rebuilding our infrastructure. There's so much that we can work together on, but that's not what they've chosen. They've chosen to go down their ideological wet dream list and go, oh, here's our chance. A once-in-a-lifetime chance to undo those things that we've always hated. You know, like poor people getting health care or poor children being fed. And you go, Rick, you're being hyperbolic. They don't believe that. Look at their budget. Look at their policy. And again, I go back to my conversation with Senator Casey over the weekend. He said, to him, the thing that stopped him dead in his tracks. Now, understand, it's my view, Senator Casey's a very moderate Democrat, a very, pragmatic guy, not taken to the winds of anger and frustration. He said, when I looked at their budget, the fact that they zeroed out LIHEAP sent me into a rage. The fact that they said, you know what, we're not funding heating assistance for low-income seniors who we know are going to freeze to death this winter. If that happens, if we allow the Republicans, Paul Ryan, Donald Trump, if we allow them to push their poison, we're going to read stories in the newspaper, if the newspapers choose to report it, of someone freezing to death in their home because there was no money to put the heat on. Let that sink in for a second. Because the reality is, I don't think that's who we are. And I know that's not what people voted for. And look, I told the story of the guy that is just vivid in my mind as I was handing out literature on Election Day. A guy who life kicked in the behind a bunch of times. And there he is wheeling his oxygen, big old oxygen tank, huffing and puffing and struggling all the way. And I would be, and again, you go back to that Republican frame. The idea of, well, we wouldn't sell someone car insurance after they crashed their car. Here's a guy I could probably almost guarantee the COPD that he had, the emphysema, the bronchitis, the lungs full with mucus and scarring, most likely caused by smoking. Most likely caused by working in an industrial setting where they didn't have proper ventilation. You don't just end up with COPD without there being a cause. You don't just end up in that situation because you were walking down the street one day. He got his oxygen because of Medicaid. He was on Social Security disability. Shared it with me. Now, I didn't ask for his email or phone number or contact information just so I could rub it in his face and say, I told you so. Just so I could say that I was right. But I wanted the reaction. I want the reaction of, that's not what I voted for. I voted for that American dream. I voted for how do we move the country forward, how to make us better, not how do we harm people. And I wonder what that guy's thinking right now as he's looking at this healthcare bill that's saying, oh, hey, by the way, sorry, we're going to cut. Last number I saw was about $1.8 trillion. They're going to cut it about in half. And then they're going to cap the amount that they're going to give to states. So poor states, southern states, Trump states, that's you. Seniors who don't have anywhere to live because your money ran out. And, oh, by the way, there's no nursing care for you because, sorry, you're broke. They're coming for you. That's what this does. And I go back to, is this what you voted for? Is this who we are? Is this where we're going? Is the next piece of legislation going to be, if you can't pay, you die? Because as we talked about earlier with Propane Jane, she said, look, we took the Hippocratic Oath. We're going to take care. We're not going to let you die. We're not going to let you die. At least not right now. I mean, at the end of it is that next? Because they're laying the groundwork of the deserving and the undeserving, of the people who deserve care and the people who don't. And then, the people who it's their fault. It's your fault that you got this disease. You did something wrong. And yet you've got all of these communities, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, just being one of them, one of thousands across this country that are dependent on federal funding to help put food on the table, keep the homes warm in the wintertime, and to make sure that when they get sick, people get seen. What's angering and frustrating is this is not my America. This is not what I grew up believing in. This is not what makes us exceptional. This is what makes us dangerous. When we allow something like this to go through, and understand, and I've been saying this for a very long time, let's say we quote unquote win and this doesn't pass. They've already done enough to destroy the Affordable Care Act. They've already done enough to cause enough harm already. They've already done it. Which is why, again, I go back to 2018 being a moment in history where we as a nation decide, which side are we on? Who are we as a country? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Is this a good bill, bad bill? I'd really love to hear somebody who thinks it's good. Rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll be back tomorrow. Another candidate from Wisconsin's 1st District. We'll see you then.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tidal flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious in